and blessed unity with the L-O-V-E. Love is the solution, so set your love free with the L-O-V-E. Further evolution and blessed unity.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Self-Love Show. I am your host, Trish Wright, and my lovely co-host, Dawn Light, is taking the day off. So let's send her a little love from the ethers. I'm so excited to share this wonderful person that we have on today, and let me tell you a little bit about it. So our show is called Loving Self Using a Map of Our Inner Seasons with Elizabeth Martin Chan. Have you ever felt the need to hibernate in the winter? Yes. Flirty in the spring? Seriously. And open to pleasure in the summer? Well, if you only knew. Or like you're just carrying too much in the autumn? Oh, yes. There are certain feels that each seasons have. And we know then, and we know them innately, right? I totally get that. Most of us have seasons we prefer. Seasons also exist in our inner world, in our inner landscape. What if radical self-love requires us to become familiar with and embrace our inner landscape through all the inner seasons? Humans stuck down what I call the human-pleasing rabbit hole. I hate this one. Tend to be acutely attuned to needs and desires. We can read the room, determine what is acceptable, understand the environment. It is how we determine safety, and it is all externally focused. When we turn our focus inward, reading the internal room or environment, it can feel incredibly uncomfortable as abandoned needs and desires are encountered. Mostly it feels safer to avoid. So all of you avoidants out there, we're sending love to you right now. It's okay. The anxious people and the fearful avoidance as well do the same thing. But most of us have never learned to pay attention to our inner seasons because we live in a really crazy society. Whether that means our menstrual, moon, yearly, developmental, or other, we just have never learned to pay attention to our inner seasons. Together, we will lay out a personal map of our inner seasons, providing a template you can return to, so that you can begin to build awareness of your inner seasons. Elizabeth Martin Chan, coach, podcaster, disruptor, helping humans climb out of the people-pleasing rabbit hole so they can feel entitled to their needs and desires, excited to jump out of bed every morning, and confident in negotiating the path they walk. Elizabeth Martin Chan is on a mission to subvert self-hate culture and reclaim intuitive wisdom. She's your accomplice in disrupting the status quo so you can reclaim self-acceptance and remember who you are. And as you know, I will send out all her information. And for those of you who are here and want to go find other, these self-love shows, including this one in about an hour, go to our YouTube page and I'll link that in. Elizabeth, thank you for being here.
Oh, Trish, thank you so much for having me. I've never had somebody read my bio with such enthusiasm.
Welcome to this day. This is what I woke up in. This is how it works out.
No, I feel totally loved.
And honestly, Elizabeth, this is also my work. Like, I am a codependency coach. This is it just like reading it and writing it and typing it all in yesterday was like, I was like, yes, this is like a show that I'm totally gonna love. Because there's so many things that we get to dissect or get to talk about or get to like look at and help our viewers understand why we do the people-pleasing thing, which is part of a research project that I'm diving. Like, I'm about 12 hours deep into a research project with 2 other assistants that are helping me kind of look at codependency. I want to start the conversation off with something. Okay. There's 2 questions that I have. I'm going to give them to you now, and you can weave them in. First, what is radical self-love to you? Can you define that and define love? And the second question is this part about, well, I'll just keep it actually. I'm changing my mind.
Okay, you're taking it back. Radical self-love to me has to do with loving all of who we are. And that's more than, the comfortable things about ourselves. Like we can look in the mirror and sort of go, okay, maybe I haven't actually looked at my face and loved all of it. I've been too busy worried about this little blemish here or whatever. That is the easy part to love.
Yes.
The harder parts to love are the parts that we've stuck away in. Actually, I like to envision it as a treasure chest. It's all those parts of ourselves that we thought in our upbringing were unacceptable. There are often, we could call them our shadow, but they're actually the best parts about who we are. And we often get uncomfortable with those parts and we judge those parts. And it's about accepting and then wrapping those parts of ourselves in love and saying, this is who I am. Even if it doesn't meet with the status quo, what's acceptable, it's who I am. And learning to love all of that.
I love that you're bringing that up. Let's talk a little bit about the status. And I'm just going to share some of my thoughts right now about this because, again, this I'm like really deep into it. I've been doing anti-oppression work over the last year, anti-racism work, and what I'm really understanding is that the way that we're programmed, or the way that we're taught, or the way that we're indoctrinated into a system that rewards sameness, rewards, like we're on a conveyor belt and we all look the same, we're the same kind of toys, that we all behave in the same way, that what that actually does is it strips our uniqueness away. It strips our ancestry and our traditions away. So this idea, which of sameness, of status quo, of social uniformity. There's another word that's this sameness piece, this social standards, including social beauty standards, gender, class, race, all of those things. When we start to strip away the identity of the individual, then we start to see self-abandonment. We start to see the system where we're taught to people please, or to look outward, or choose to go outward to find validation and love and acceptance. And so there's pieces there where these colonizations or these white supremacist kind of thoughts that have been centuries coming forward, is like, it's these pieces that we get to unlock, right? The places of, do I live in the status quo and be accepted, or do I find ways to push the limits of that container to be authentic? And that's the authenticity piece, as terrifying as it is the piece of greatest self-acceptance, right? For me. So I know that was a lot and it was kind of heavy. I'm sorry. I probably should have trigger warned everyone that that's where I was going. But for some of you who have watched the show, you know that this is where my work lives. What I really do want to ask you is how is go ahead and, just reflect back onto whatever it was that I just said. And what is your understanding of the status quo? And do you find the status quo suffocating?
Okay, we're going to put a pin on in the suffocation and come back to it because you've said a lot.
Oh, also a baited question. That was how do you find the status quo? Sorry, can I retract it?
Yeah, no, because actually suffocating it's pretty perfect. But I want to put a pin in it because I do want to reflect on, you said a lot, and we're very much in alignment in our interests. One of the things I think is really important when we think about status quos and sameness and being accepted, all of these things, I think is really, really important to reflect on how much of that is in our DNA.
Yes.
And how essential that was in ancient times for our survival.
Yes.
Because people pleasing is actually all about surviving.
Yes.
And in order to survive in the tribe or the community, in our ancestors and our ancient ancestors' lives, they had to be accepted enough not to be banished. And banishment means death.
Yes.
If you're not with the community. So it's really, really important, I think, to remember that this idea of sameness is really written in our DNA. It's not us being weak or not honoring. And there's this fine line about where do you honor yourself and where do you need to feel like you're a part of something safe, right?
Question on that too.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's my first reflection, that it's really important not to judge ourselves for having all this sameness, this need for sameness, this need to be accepted. At the same time, in a culture that has so many opportunities, and we can survive by being outside of that small community that might have been what we grew up in, that survival is more possible. If we're exiled from that, we can still survive. So learning to be able to build a relationship with self so that we can begin to read our own authenticity allows us to feel more comfortable with being more on the edge and challenging that box that of safety that we developed. Each of us developed our own unique idea of what was safe.
Again, it's based in survival.
Yeah.
So for all of you who are dropping into attachment theory right now, there's the human body and brain is a fascinating creature, and it is set to survive. It will do that. So in childhood, we develop skills to survive. Our brains are like constantly finding ways to get our needs met. Like this is how I feel about humans. I'm like, if you drop out the consciousness of being able to think and just set it on autopilot, your body and your psyche will automatically find ways to get your needs met, regardless of whether you contemplate it or not. You're just going to do it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, for some of us, that we grew up in crazy dangerous childhoods or crazy dangerous households or in cultures that aren't incredibly loving or accepting. They're not like, oh, be yourself, you little freak, do your thing. Oh yeah, we're not like that. You're like, oh, you're doing that thing again. where you're dressing like a boy or playing with boys things, or you're doing the girl thing, like you're doing that thing again, you're being weird. Like we don't support those authentic expressions, right? So then your brain as a little child is like, I gotta do the thing. I have to smile, or I have to be good, or I have to manipulate to get my needs met, or you know. And so there's a nature versus, it's a nature and nurture thing. I don't think the versus thing. It is ingrained in our being because we are tribal. We're so herd-ish animals. We like to connect. And then there's the nurture behavior piece as well. Where I wanted to go, which is something that you touched on, is, and it's a conversation that I've been having over the last 3 or 4 days with a bunch of different people on the phone and on Marco Polo. I don't know if you use any of these things, but they're really cool little gadgets. Humans are so amazing. About attunement. Yeah. The difference between codependency or self-abandonment, people-pleasing, for the getting needs met while self-abandoning. I'm just going to define that as that for a lack of, for a shortened moment. So there's that. And then there's, how do you attune and negotiate reality? I love that you said negotiate, like in your, and I was like, yeah, negotiating reality would be like, Elizabeth, I know that you only want chocolate ice cream for the rest of our time together, for the rest of the week. And because we're in close contact and we're going to be eating the same things, I'm wondering if there's a way that I don't actually like chocolate. I'm wondering if we can get vanilla and add flavors to it to make it chocolate. Would that be sufficient? So that would be a way where I'm not abandoning self and you're not abandoning self, but we're finding a way to negotiate reality. So that's, how does one know when they're calibrating or attuning? Is there a difference? And how do they know when they're self-abandoning?
I think so much of it has to do with going back to the body.
Yes, I love you so much. Will you adopt me? I just so sorry for the love fest over here, you all. I don't know this person very well. And I'm like, oh my God, yes. So go ahead.
Yeah, Dawn brought us together. So this is like a completely new conversation for both of us. And it's fun. We have to go back to the body and building a relationship, getting to know our body and who we are. I mean, I think we sort of assume we know what's going on in here, and we don't, because we're not taught to be attuned to our body and the wisdom that's in our body. We're taught to be, we live in a culture that puts this above everything. It's like, Descartes said, what did he say? Because I think I am?
Yes.
Something like that. I'm losing it at the moment. I mean, we know it, right?
I think, therefore I am.
I think, therefore I am. Mm-hmm. But the truth is, I feel, therefore I am.
Yes.
But we've lived off of Descartes, I think, for hundreds of years. And we've been so focused on the brain and that being how we define ourselves. But the sensations in our body, that's where we're really experiencing who we are and also our experience in relation. So yes, our survival, I just want to say right now, I will come back to this. I think we're born into this world as divine beings, meant to have a human experience. So have all the forgiveness in the world around all of this. This is in my DNA and needing to be safe and secure. That's part of the experience. So the invitation is to bring our divineness into unity with this human experience. And that means coming back to the body and building a relationship with, like, who the hell am I? Who the hell did I bring into this world in my divineness? And I can't know that if I don't build a relationship with myself.
Someone shared something with me just yesterday. They were like, "You're just so brave and courageous. I could never be like you." I wanna just tell a little bit about, and I'd love to hear your personal story as well. So I've never been this person ever in my life. This person, the one that you all see, and you've been watching over the last year. I've never been this person ever in my life. And I started off in a small town in Montana, to a single mother who was doing her best, married a man who was not home as often. My parents, my dad would talk shit about my mom. They were divorced. Like, it was like there was a lot of shit going on. They were children of, my mom was a child of severe abuse and had lots of anger, which is totally fine. Like she transformed that the best that she could with what she had. So I came into the world as a deep love child, but I also grew up in Montana, which is very patriarchal, very cishet patriarchal, very racist, very closed-minded, very, very specific kind of teachings. And I got the whole society's understanding of what love looks like in Disney Channel, and you just name it. I got to have those layers in this lifetime. And what's happened is that through 2 sexual experiences that were terrifying and destroying emotionally, physically, and self-esteemly, I'm just gonna make words up now, destroying, that there were ways that I had to, like, I actually had to walk through certain doorways or certain understandings of self. And I had to actually find acceptance that there were things that I created. There were things that I was taking on as a personal experience, like someone else's treatment of me was because I deserved it, which is a whole society's thing, like not mine. I had to actually walk through these things to get to a place. And again, I've been on this journey for about 12 years, you all. I've been looking and doing therapy and doing spiritual workshops and looking at the darkness and looking at my shadow, which I've been doing all of that and looking at how I create the world through my eyes to become the person that you're seeing. That to find my authenticity is because I chose that was my guiding light, my purpose for me. That self-love that I had to look at. Okay, here's that seasonal depression thing's coming on. Can I just be with myself there? Can I just say, okay, I can love the darkness there.
Yeah.
I'm not going to judge it, because you know what happens when you judge something or you create a blockage around it? It stays.
Mm-hmm.
But when you look at it and you're like, oh, this, I can be with this. It also expands your capacity to love other people. So when someone says, oh, I could never be authentic, or I can never not people please, or I can never do these things, just know that for a meek little Montana girl who was terrified of the world, terrified to say no, to be this person now, I'm sure Elizabeth, Dawn, myself, Scott Katamas, there's many people who want to hold your hand and are saying, like, yes, we'll walk with you through this journey of authenticity and self-love. So I'd love to hear a little bit of how you got here, and talk to me about your people pleasing and how you got here, and what shifted. What was the aha where you're like, I'm not fucking dealing with this shit anymore?
Yeah. Okay. First, I'm going to say that, who I am today is not who I've been most of my life. And I've been doing this work for about 8 years. And I think of it as a pilgrimage home to self. And the thing about a pilgrimage is it's not about the destination. It's about the journey.
Yes.
So I'll start with that. My story. So I'm a child of divorce. I was 6 when my father moved out. 6 or 7 when the divorce went through. I'm probably a little older than you. When my parents were divorced, it was early to mid 70s, and we hadn't yet hit the wave of divorces. So really, we were sort of the only kids I knew that were children of divorce. So I didn't have a cohort. I was very different in that. And I was desperately trying to mother my mother, who was devastated by the divorce, and yet it was the best thing that ever happened to her. Because she took back her own power, and went on to study theology. I'm a priest kid, and was ordained to the priesthood within the first 5 years of women being ordained into the Episcopal Church. And we moved around. I live in Canada, and I ended up in Canada because my mother came here to do a PhD. So I'm the child of intellects. My father's a lawyer. My mother's was a theologian with a PhD. And I am somebody who needed to be in my body. And I always felt like I wasn't accepted for that part of who I was. I took dance classes as much as we could sort of afford. There's a whole financial component to it. And I also recognized that both of my parents were very wounded people. And, you go back generations. It's really interesting to do the epigenetic stuff. You go back generations and, the wounding of my grandparents and the wounding of my great-grandparents and how that all trickled down to both of my parents. And breaking some of those patterns is part of what am doing now. I married fairly early. I went to university because that was what was expected. I actually have 2 grandmothers who went to university. They didn't necessarily finish, but so that concept of higher education was so important. And here I am needing to be in my body. Like, love me for that need. But nobody, even our culture, right? Like, it's not just the parents, it's the culture. Yeah. Head up. Yeah. Yep. Head up. So I married, I had kids. I did the mom thing. I'm fortunate to be in a marriage where we make enough money that I don't have to be out of the home. I got really into, and I suppressed myself, right? I've really been surviving. And the only place that was allowed to shine, who I was, sort of my purpose was allowed to shine, was I got really into alternative education. I became a Montessori educator, but I was always I was way out in left field, even in that, even in the alternative education field. And so all my kids sort of went through alternative education till high school, and then they joined the sort of normal world. But I was always, the thing that always was behind all of that is the importance of the dignity of the individual.
Yes.
So that's what sort of drove me as a mother. And then when my 3rd child went off to university, I have 4, something started to crack within me. And I really, I experienced it on a physical level. It was like I was vibrating off the walls. I was like this ping pong that was going back and forth and back and forth. And I was cracking open. And as Leonard Cohen says, that's when the light comes in. And it's been it's been one hell of a ride. You have to walk through it. You have to dive into the darkness in order to come out of it and to see things differently. And yeah, I've been through therapy, and then I came out of therapy and realized I needed to really find different ways of looking at things. And I got into somatic work, and I started, learning about all of that, and how do we learn to have a relationship with our bodies and who we are, and getting past the brain and the ego, and really, really digging in and learning who we are. So that's what brought me where I am today. And it's a pilgrimage, and it's a never-ending journey. And you hit those edges that are uncomfortable, and it's like, shit, I guess I got to figure this one out. But you're more equipped. The more you become in relationship with self, the more you relate, the more equipped you are to do the work.
Yes.
And to walk your truth, and to speak your truth. And then start to realize, I'm a privileged white girl. Yes. And I have to really learn to listen. I love that you started out talking about race earlier, because that's been a passion of mine as well. There's so much there that I have to learn, but there's parallels and there's privilege. There's parallels in that we're all survivors. And that's where I can build on my empathy to know what it is to be a survivor. And to recognize, I don't know your experience. Teach me.
Yes. Empathy. I feel just now that we're going to have a long, loving friendship. Yeah, there's. I'm like using a butterfly net to catch my thoughts right now. Put them back in. First thing before I lose it is I recently took a course. You people who have watched my show or the show have heard about it. It was a course called Heal Thyself, a Transformative Initiation for People Racialized as White. And I would love to share the link with you and with everyone here. And that was a really powerful, it was very powerful for me to take this course. I've done anti-oppression and anti-racism work before, and this gave me a whole other view and understanding of what's behind the filter that I live in. It also helped me understand how the history of white supremacy has really hurt me as well, and has really dissolved my connection to my ancestors and my tradition and myself. And it inspired me to actually go and talk to my grandmother who's still alive and write down stories about her life and all the like crazy, find interesting understandings about who my family was, where they came from, how they came from, like on a boat from Ireland in 1906. Like, wow. Yeah. That I'm not the only Patricia Wright in my family. Wow. Totally unrelated to my name or anything like that. Like just little things that made me feel more connected, not only to myself, but to them.
Yeah.
So there was one piece, but also this understanding, moving forward, this understanding of like recognizing that it's not just a personal problem, but a social problem is also very important. And I think that's why I love that you're doing this work, because I'm like, yes, the more that we all can have this conversation about living in sovereignty, which doesn't mean, I'm going to do whatever I want and fuck you, but living in my truth, negotiating reality and into attunement and calibration with other humans and the world and the universe and the plants and animals, like that is is how we move forward to move forward in loving and to dissolve these like oppressive systems that we participated in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about, how do you know attunement?
Yeah.
How do you know when you're attuning? How do you know when you're self-abandoning? Like these two pieces are, I think, really important because, you know, we have families. Like some of us
Yeah.
have children, some
Yeah.
of us have partners, and you have to, I don't really like the word compromise, but I do like the word negotiate, because
Mm-hmm.
that, it sounds more engaging. Like compromise to me sounds like someone has to bend. And in a society where women have been taught that that's what they're supposed to do, I often am like, can we shift the language around it or the meaning? So negotiation and attunement versus self-abandonment and placation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. But I think the more you learn who you are, the more you do the work of building that relationship with self, the more you know what your truth is. And that helps you to distinguish whether you're self-abandoning or whether you're, you know, attuned to yourself. And I think sometimes we do make choices, but if we can make them on a conscious level, and what can I live with, versus I need to survive and I'm not thinking about this, I'm putting my head down into the sand, and on an unconscious level, I'm just doing what I have to do. So when we make conscious decisions, because we live in community, whatever that community looks like, but we make those on conscious levels, and we know when we can't make those compromises or those negotiations. We have to be able to speak our truth, and that's where the edge is so hard, because if you've been a people pleaser, like I really have been, you're so worried about the other person. And part of sovereignty is being worried about your own, right? Your own needs, your own voice, your own truth. And you know, it to some extent it's about disrupting those norms.
Yes.
And finding where that balance is for you as an individual, as to which of those disruptions do you want to walk, or which of those disruptions have you been asked by your divine part to walk. You know, and it's a process of discovering. I still discover, like, oh, I was doing that. Well, now that I'm conscious of it, that's obvious, but I wasn't conscious of it. It's just was part of abandoning myself, or part of my survival mechanisms. And for me, it's been a process of going from survival to living. And my ultimate goal is to be able to fearlessly thrive. Yes. And every time I can fearlessly thrive, I've become more of who I am. So, you know, it's a journey. And I hope that I'm at peace with that the day that I die. And I'm willing to accept that it will take me to the day that I die to be as whole as I'm going to be in this lifetime.
Yes. So the thing that just,
I know there's so much. I mean, I could have responded to a bunch of things that you said.
I know. Like, this conversation is so big. It is literally my life's work. Yeah. It's obviously literally your life's work. And this conversation could go for hours. And I know that maybe it will. Maybe we'll have a conversation around that. And so what I wanted to share a little bit about is how I know when I'm in attunement or when I'm in a self-abandonment. And so as a recovering, because I will always be recovering, So codependency is an addiction. People pleasing is an addiction, and it's a chemical reaction in our brain set to something that is outside of self. And it's like, I need this to feel whole, which is fine. It's perfect. Addiction is everywhere. We're addicted to the chemistry in our brain. So as a recovering people pleaser, as a recovering codependent, things that I know, here's where I know that I'm going to self-abandon. I get really confused, torn in different directions of things that I know that I want to do and I should do, or like, oh my God, if I do this thing that's what I need to do for me, it's going to hurt the other person. And then there's that tug and pull, and that feeling inside of me, and it could be different for you all, is it feels like there's a rope from my throat down into the pit of my stomach, and it's being twisted, and it feels really uncomfortable. Like I get kind of like, ah! So I notice that when I'm in conflict or confusion, then I need to slow down there. So there's one piece of knowing when I'm going to self-abandon or knowing. The other piece is that when I'm focused on the other person, when I'm obsessively thinking, that is like a, okay, Trish, slow down, take a deep breath. What is it that you want to happen? Because people pleasing is also a manipulation. It's also a gaslighting technique to get your needs met. So it's deeply harmful for the other person, and it also destroys trust. I know that was a lot. Sorry, well, that's a big like ping for you. Take a deep breath. Yes, I know. So in that place, it's like, okay, what do you want to happen? What are you afraid that's going to happen? Like, and start just tracking back all of those things. Now, when I know that I'm in attunement is when I know that I can move into, so I'm scared. Obviously, I'm scared at this point, and I can say, okay, I can lean in and say, Elizabeth, I'm scared. What's happening in my body is this, and what I feel like I need is this. What I have already done is self-sourced my needs for connection, safety, and like I've already done the personal work. I've gone to self first to get the things met that I needed to get met as much as I possibly can. I don't believe that we can get all of our needs met all alone, because that's unrealistic. And then, so when I'm as full as I can be, and I can step into courage and bravery and be like, I know you might not like this. Can you, I need to share this with you. Can we negotiate reality together? That's when I know that I'm in attunement and calibration. That's when I know that I'm capable of holding your feelings about my interaction, my reaction, my response, and the question or the thing that I need. Because then I can take your no. I know that I'm in attunement and calibration when I can hear your yes and no without having an explosive reaction. I'm not going to have a response, don't get me wrong, but that's when I know that I'm in attunement and calibration.
Right. So I know I'm abandoning self when I numb. Right. So when I get emotionally numb, and sometimes I speed up and sometimes I slow down. It can look like binging on a television for 8 hours.
Yes.
It can look like, going crazy in the kitchen cooking. It can look like getting into running, which I did at one point. And I love running, but I have to do it again in a way that isn't running away.
Yes.
And I literally went through a stage about 15 years ago where I went out for a run every morning, and it was me running away from stuff that was coming up, from the truth that was trying to speak to me, and that I couldn't yet hear.
Yes.
I know I'm in attunement when I have a peace in my body and something from my gut that says yes.
Yes. Do you know
Yeah.
what the feeling is? Like, if for everybody who's listening and watching, just do you know the yes in your body? Like, can you access that point of knowing yes, the contentment that feels? Go ahead.
Yeah, and that's why we have to build relationship with self, because most of us were at a point, and maybe you still are, where you don't know that point because you don't have a relationship with your body. And that's why that piece is that's what I'm so passionate about, and it's so critical. Yeah, no, go ahead.
We're at 46 minutes. I'm just going to let you know. But I also want to say that I would love to answer Bill's question. And I'm just going to put it up on screen. And for everyone who's just listening, it says, what does fearlessly thriving look like to you? And I'm wondering if I answered that.
Fearlessly thriving, it's when I take that. So I was actually, the next thing I was going to talk about was, you talked about how you know that you're leaning into your fears, right? You recognize that as fears. So I've been working really hard on this concept of rewiring our interpretation of the sensation in the body. So the interpretation is what the brain does. Mm-hmm. And it says, I'm afraid.
Yes.
But there's a really close, if not exactly the same sensation in the body between fear and something that I like to use that's a neutral word. Well, there's excitement, but I like to use the word thrill. So when those sensations come up for me, I'm working really hard on rewiring fear to, oh my God, there's a thrill. And it's like a roller coaster, right? Like, people love to go on roller coasters because there's this fear / excitement / thrill. So when those fears come up, what happens if you rewire it as, or relabel it as, a thrill? And if I do this thrill, is it in alignment with that sense of peace and need? Like, because the thing in the gut is the need. This is what I really need. So when I fearlessly thrive, when I'm choosing those opportunities to fearlessly thrive, it's meeting that moment where I've got that fear / I'm trying to reinterpret it as a thrill, and I'm stepping into it, and I'm doing it anyway, and I'm thriving. That's when I actually feel like I'm thriving in my authentic self. And that's my goal, is to be trying to live every day in that place of fearlessly thriving.
I love that response. Bill, I hope that answered it for you. And for me, fearlessly thriving for me looks like consciously making choices to live authentically without participating in abusive tendencies. So that means, again, I think people pleasing is a harmful tactic. So in that sense, is me being honest. Am I honest? Am I being radically, lovingly, compassionately honest? I don't need to be like, rah, am I being honest? Am I able to show up in my yes? Am I able to say my no's? Am I able to hear someone else's no's? And am I able to self-source my discomfort? Like, am I able to be like, okay, I'm overwhelmed. I need to just like go settle down or self-regulate enough to come back to this conversation. And am I living in my curiosity?
Mhm.
Which is a lot of it.
Yeah.
Am I living in curiosity? Am I saying, okay, Trish, this is kind of a weird, crazy curiosity. Can I just lean in and not judge myself for loving popcorn or having this random fantasy that I might want to, or can I, because we're all freaks. Right? We're all kind of freaky. It's just if you allow yourself to be freaky or not.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up curiosity, because that's such an essential component to all of this, right? Like, we get stuck in the hard box of where we think we need to be, and curiosity allows us to start expanding that.
I also just thought of something that I really want to bring in. I had to accept. So there's a couple things, hard truths that I also had to accept. I'm a person who causes harm. I'm a racist, inherently. There are, like, all the places where I heard myself, I am not that person. Nope, I'm that person.
Mm-hmm.
I am all the things that I think I am and all the things that I think I'm not. I am
Mm-hmm.
all of those people. And when I started to accept the fact that I am the most heinous person as well as the most loving person, that I could accept that there were things that about me that don't live in the status quo, and there are things that are like,
Mm-hmm.
I am capable of hurting people.
Mm-hmm.
Do I choose to do that? Not as often as I can consciously say no. Like, yes, I don't do that as often as I can. And I will cause harm.
Mm-hmm.
I've been living in a racist society taught by, I behave in these ways that are subtly racist all the time.
Right.
I get to choose to dissolve that.
Right.
And that's what I'm choosing. Do you see how this is working? Do you see this kind of like, this is my authenticity, is to dissolve the things that, or to just love them. Like, okay, this is what I do. I can love myself here. I have to love myself here so that I can move forward. Remember what I said earlier in the conversation, that if you resent or reject or push away something that is you, or something that you think about, or something that you want, like, it's only gonna stay in its current rendition. Right. in the darkness.
Right. And those are the dark areas when we were talking about radical self-love.
Yes.
We actually have to love that that's who we are, and it's freaking hard. But love, and it's a compassion. I mean, we know we're racist because of what we have experienced in our own lives and our ancestors. But we can't dissolve it until we wrap it in love from ourselves. That doesn't mean justifying it and saying this is okay. It means, shit, I see this part of myself, and I can either hate it and push it away, or push it down into that part of myself where I don't acknowledge it, or I can bring it into the light and embrace it as part of who I am. And now what? Now that I love it, I can do something with it.
Love, not as being this like, oh,
love isn't that. Love is, it's so deep and rich and full of everything. It's in the dirt, and it's when we get our fingers, it's like gardening, right? Like, it's, you get your fingers in that cool, nurturing dirt. That's where love is too. It's not all up here.
And I shared this with you behind the scenes earlier, and some of you have heard me say this. My definition currently of love is the radical acceptance of what is. And what acceptance does not mean justifying or saying that it's okay. Like, the way that I've behaved in the past, and there are still behaviors that I have in this incarnation right now that I don't justify. Like, I cannot do those things. And can I accept that this is part of me in this rendition now? Yes. There's things that are happening in my life. I have to say, all right, this is part of me. I can look back and find where it came from. I can start to dissolve the habit of behaving that way now that I'm aware of it. And now that I can accept that this is part of me, now I can move forward. I know that we've taken this conversation a slight bit around, like maybe not in the conversation of seasons, but I'm wondering if you wanted to take it back there as well as move into something that you want to just share with our viewers.
Yeah. So part of getting to know yourself is getting to know those inner seasons. So today I'm going to share a practice with you, or a tool that you can go back to, of mapping your inner seasons. So I'm going to walk you through a fairly simple practice to tune into your inner seasons, to your inner cycles. We all innately know the seasons, and most of us don't have an intimate connection to the seasons. They're part of who we are, and they're part of how we are able to show up in the world as we flow through life. So I'm going to ask you to bring your awareness to your body, and as feels comfortable to you, lower your gaze or close your eyes. And if there is any place in your body that feels uncomfortable as you bring your awareness to your body, imagine sending your next few breaths there. Send some heart love to those spaces and envelop them with non-judgmental love. Now imagine energetically preparing a 360-degree space around you, with your physical body as the center point. And check in and make sure that you've included the space behind you. It's really common to have difficulty including that space, but energetically it's really important because it's where we feel support. Now I'm going to walk you through a process where we unfurl a map of your inner seasons. So I want you to physically reach down to the space in front of your pelvic region and grab hold of your map. And as you bring it upward, imagine feeling the sensation of an 8-petal flower rising up around you, cradling you within it. So we're now going to allow the experience of each petal opening, gently exposing itself onto the prepared 360 space around you, so you can see your map. And as the first petal opens, we're looking at it as part of the cycle of the year. And the first petal represents the time in the cycle of the year between winter solstice and early February. And it's the time when the sun begins to grow again out of darkness. There's a tenderness to this time. There's a newness, an uncertainty, a sense of self-sufficiency, and also celebration. And I'm going to ask you to recall what this time of year must have been like for our ancient agricultural ancestors. There's a promise of newness in the sun beginning its journey back, as light is increasing within each day. There's uncertainty as it was necessary to still rely on the food stores and preserves of the last harvests and the last hunting season. There's this continued need for self-sufficiency because our ancestors lived as small tribal groups, and they didn't travel when the weather didn't permit it. So there was real need for self-sufficiency. And it's a time of gathering around fire, of celebrating the rebirth of light, the promise of order over the chaos of darkness. Just take a moment to sense into that portion of the map of your inner seasons. The second petal opens. In the cycle of the year, it represents the time between early February and the spring equinox. It's the time when the first signs of thaw appear. Nature is slowly showing evidence of life returning. It's a time of purification, rededication, hope, and potential in the reawakening. For our ancient agricultural ancestors, it was a time of purification or cleaning after months of confinement. It's a time of rededication and commitment, a dedication to the work ahead in the coming time when we would prepare the land and the planting. It's not time for that yet, but there's this sense of commitment to that. It's a time of reawakening from hibernation, and there's hope and potential around that. Take a moment and sense into that portion of the map of your inner seasons. The third petal opens. In the cycle of the year, it represents the time between spring and the spring equinox and early May. It's the time when we sense the triumph of light over darkness as the number of hours of sunlight meet and then grow to exceed the number of hours of darkness. It's a time when life is springing forth, where there's a trust in one's strength within. And it's a time of knowing of a coming abundance. For our agricultural ancestors, there was evidence of fertility. Eggs are starting to be produced. Bees are coming out of dormancy. Fruit trees come into blossom. There's a knowing of survival through the sacrifice of the harsh, dark months. And with that knowledge, there's this recognition of inner strength. There's an energy and earnest for hard work that's in that belief that's rooted in that sense of having survived, and there's a belief in the coming abundance in the planting. Take a moment and sense into that portion of your map of your inner seasons. The fourth petal opens. In the cycle of the year, it represents the time between early May and the summer solstice. It's a time of interconnection, union, and passion. For our ancient agricultural ancestors, it was a time when communities began to reconnect with each other because travel was possible. It's a time of union between masculine and feminine, between the seed and the fertile land. Without union, there is no harvest, no new life. It was a time of experiencing earthly joy, pleasure, and passion. Take a moment and sense into that portion of the map of your inner seasons. The fifth petal opens. In the cycle of the year, it represents the time between summer solstice and early August. It's the time of shining bright like the sun, of accomplishments, and also of resting. For our ancient agricultural ancestors, the summer solstice exhibited the full strength of the sun. It is a time to recognize the sun in its fullness. There was accomplishment and pride in the work that's been done, the fields that are growing, and the livestock that have been born and nurtured into midsummer. There's little work to be done while the crops are growing, but there's an awareness of the work to come, and resting now is good. Take a moment and sense into that portion of the map of your inner seasons. The sixth petal opens. In the cycle of the year, it represents the time between early August and the autumn equinox. It's a time of focus on work, effort, and preparation. For our ancient agricultural ancestors, this is a time of gathering the harvest. It required a lot of work and effort. There's also a playfulness of abundance, a time to take pride in one's work and to celebrate the fruits of the harvest. It's also a time to begin the process of planning for the future, collecting the seeds which we'll need the following year. There's a process of preservation of food going on. Take a moment and sense into that portion of the map of your inner seasons. The seventh petal opens. In the cycle of the year, it represents the time between autumn equinox and early November. No, not early November. And yes, early November, pardon me. I often think of the end of October, but it's really early November. It's a time of gratitude, appraisal, and letting go. For our ancient agricultural ancestors, light and dark met balance, and then there's movement into more hours of dark than light. It's a time to be thankful for all of the abundance of the growing season. It's also a time to take stock, to determine what's necessary to see us through the coming lean months. It's a time to let go of what is no longer necessary. Take a moment and sense into that portion of the map of your inner seasons. The last petal, the eighth petal, opens. In the cycle of the year, it represents the time between early November and the winter solstice. It's a time of death, protection, stillness, and close connection. It's the time we're in right now, and it's often the hardest time. For our ancient agricultural ancestors, this is a time of real death. The harvest is done. Anything that's left in the field belongs to the world of the other world. It isn't practical to feed animals who will not survive the winter, so livestock needs to be culled. The needs of the community must be considered. It's a time to turn inward, to honor ancestors, but also to protect from the other world, from death, and from the elements. It's a time when all is slowing down, hibernating. It's a time to gather close and tight with others in small communities. Take a moment and sense into that portion of your inner seasons. And as you look around you, surrounded by your map, reflect briefly on all the stages of your inner seasons. Some you will feel more at home in, some will resonate with you more, and some will be spaces of discomfort. They're all part of you. We all cycle through these inner seasons at different paces. They can be cycled through like in a moon cycle or a menstrual cycle. We definitely cycle through them in a yearly. They can be different speeds, different time frames, different paces, and they're in layers. Allow the petals to fold back up, embracing you. Gather them together and grab hold of them and draw them back down, putting them away. Know that you can pull out the map of your inner seasons whenever you need to know where you are or what parts of you need to explore. Take a few breaths to bring your body back to the physical room that you're in. And when you're ready, open your eyes.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that beautiful guided journey in yourself to the places, the seasons, the connection, and to that ancestry, that the connection to the earth and the body, the breath, the cycles of life.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that we will be integrating that work for some time. For all of you who are listening and watching, I invite you to share in something that you're getting out of this. It's just so deeply loving.
Thank you, Trish. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Yeah. I would like to drop in some of these links. So if you didn't catch, you came in the middle of that last section, go back and watch us on YouTube. We're going to send this over. And I'm also going to send over all of Elizabeth's amazing work. Can you tell us a little bit about these links that I'm going to be dropping in? So talk about the podcast, where they can find it, what they can find on it. So I'm dropping into the Listen to No People Pleasing Zone podcast, and also you can grab a copy of Adventures in Reclaiming Your Life, 5 Secrets to Every People-Pleasing Woman Should Know, at her website. And I'm sure that men can go there too. And lastly, follow Elizabeth on Instagram right here. we're having a little bit of a technical difficulty right now. So thank you all for showing up. Thank you all for being here, for showing up for you. I again want to say thank you. Oh, there you are. You're back again.
Sorry. Don't know if that was me, but sorry.
It's all good. Can you share a little bit about these links that I just sent in? So share a little bit about your podcast, what happens when they connect to your website. Do you work with men as well? And a little bit about what they see on your Instagram as well.
So my Instagram would be mostly thoughts around people pleasing. It's usually connected in with a theme that is my weekly theme that would be on my podcast, the No People Pleasing Zone. No People Pleasing Zone is really about, niching down to what it is to be a people pleaser, how we get there, how we might shift our perspectives, and really, yeah, digging into what that means to be down what I call the people pleasing rabbit hole.
Yep.
And I provided you with a link to it's a resource for reasons why it is directed at women, although that doesn't mean that a human of any gender identity or non-gender identities wouldn't get something out of that. And I've been really beginning to shift my work away from specifically women. So yes, I more than invite anyone who feels the, who wants to reach out to me or who resonates with what I'm talking about. All are invited.
Thank you. Thank you again for being on the show and doing your work in the world. I would love to talk to you a little bit more about some of my thoughts and thinking, and maybe I can set a time with you to just share that in a week or two after I...
Yeah, I'd love that.
And go ahead.
I was going to say, I think we have a lot to talk about.
And for anybody who's still watching and listening and who wants more information, go to these links, go to our YouTube. You can find us on Facebook, obviously, and we've got some really cool things coming up, so stay tuned. I really want to give a big shout out to Sign Network, John and Summer Raymer, for being just stunningly lovely people at Sign Network, for sharing us out. Thank you so much. And Scott Katamas, as always, for being the muse and for being a really amazingly dear friend to me and being my mentor and being just the most patient, kind, generous man I've ever met. Thank you again for just being you and for offering to let me into the Love Coach Academy at the beginning of the pandemic, because this is why we're here. So thank you again to Love Coach Academy, and let's all just give a lot of beaming love light to Dawn Light right now, and her awesome work in the world, and herself and her family. And we will catch you next week, Thursday morning, 10 a.m., right here. Same place, or wait, what is it? Same bat channel. All right. I'll see you guys next week. Or you all. No, guys. Y'all. I'll see you all next week. Right here, right now. Bye.
Bye.